The distant thunder of hooves shook Winifred Blackburn awake just before dawn, the orange glow outside her bedroom window illuminating her worst fears. Bandits. The kind that had been terrorizing homesteads across the Wyoming Territory since gold was discovered in '67. Now it was 1871, and her father's warnings echoed in her mind as she scrambled for her shotgun. Fire! Fire! The shouts outside confirmed what the acrid smell already told her. Winifred whinnied to those who knew her rushed through the cabin, her nightgown billowing around her legs as flames licked at the outer walls. "Pa!" she screamed, bursting into her father's room to find it empty, the bedsheets thrown aside. Through the window, she caught sight of him in the yard, shotgun raised against 5 mounted men. Before she could reach the door, the sound of gunfire split the air. The shot hit her father square in the chest. He crumpled to the dirt as Winnie watched in horror from the doorway. One of the bandits spotted her, pointing and shouting. Survival instinct took over. She slammed the door shut, barred it, and ran back through the burning house, gathering only what she could carry: her mother's silver locket, the family Bible, and the small pouch of coins her father kept beneath the floorboard. The back window was her only escape. Winnie crawled through it, tumbling into the vegetable garden just as the roof began to collapse. She didn't look back, just ran, legs pumping as she made for the tree line beyond the property. Only when she reached the cover of the forest did she pause, turning to face what had been her home for all 22 years of her life. The cabin was fully engulfed now, flames shooting skyward, black smoke billowing against the lightning dawn sky. Of the bandits, there was no sign they'd taken what they wanted and moved on, leaving destruction in their wake. Tears streamed down Winnie's face as she watched her past burn away. She had nothing now. No one. "Get down!" A harsh whisper came from behind her, followed by a rough hand on her shoulder pushing her to the ground. Winnie fell into the underbrush, a scream catching in her throat as a tall figure crouched beside her. A man with a weather-beaten face, stubbled jaw, and eyes the color of storm clouds. "They circle back sometimes," he whispered, nodding toward the burning homestead. "Checking for survivors." As if confirming his words, 2 riders appeared from around the barn, scanning the tree line. The man beside her drew his pistol, holding it ready, but making no move to fire. "Who are you?" Winnie whispered when the riders finally turned away. "Name's Mitch Jones," he said, his voice as rough as the leather vest he wore. "Most folks call me Mitch. I'm Winifred Blackburn." "You shouldn't be here when they come back," he said, holstering his weapon. "And they will come back." "I have nowhere to go," she admitted. Mitch studied her for a long moment, then glanced back at the burning cabin. "My camp's half a day's ride west. You can rest there while you figure out your next move." Winnie stared at the stranger, weighing her limited options. Stay and face the bandits, or trust this cowboy she'd just met. The smoke from her home was beginning to dissipate into the morning sky, the flames dying down as the structure collapsed in on itself. "I can't just leave," she said, her voice breaking. "My father will come back," Mitch promised, "when it's safe. Give him a proper burial." His expression softened slightly. "But right now we need to go." Winnie took one last look as her childhood home smoldered. Everything she knew was vanishing into ash and smoke. Mitch stood, offering his hand. "I've got a horse just over the ridge. We need to move now." Tears streaming down her face, Winnie watched smoke from her old home fade until the cowboy said, "I've got room for memories too, madam. But right now, we need those memories alive, not dead." Something in his words, in the unexpected gentleness behind his gruff exterior, made her take his hand. He pulled her to her feet and led her deeper into the forest, away from everything she'd ever known. Mitch's horse was a magnificent bay stallion, 17 hands high, with intelligent eyes that watched them approach. The animal nickered softly as Mitch mounted, then extended his hand down to Winnie. You ever ridden double before? He asked. She shook her head, clutching her small bundle of possessions to her chest. Well, there's a first time for everything, he said, hauling her up behind him. Hold on tight. We've got ground to cover. Winnie hesitated before wrapping her arms around his waist. The intimacy of it made her uncomfortable, but when the horse lurched forward, she had no choice but to hold tight, feeling the solid warmth of him through his cotton shirt. They rode in silence as the sun climbed higher, following game trails through the forest before emerging onto rolling grasslands. Winnie's mind kept returning to her father, to the sight of him falling in the dirt. Guilt gnawed at her. She hadn't even tried to help him. She'd just run. It's not your fault, Mitch said suddenly, as if reading her thoughts. Nothing you could have done except get yourself killed too. You don't know that, she replied. Been riding these territories for 15 years, he said. Seen what men like that do. Your pa knew it too. He was buying you time. The matter-of-fact way he said it made Winnie's tears start again. She pressed her forehead against his back, trying to stifle the sobs. Mitch didn't comment, just kept riding, his body a solid anchor as grief washed over her in waves. By midday, they had reached a creek where Mitch allowed his horse to drink. He helped Winnie down, her legs stiff and sore from the unaccustomed riding. We'll rest here a bit, he said, pulling a canteen from his saddlebag. He offered it to her first, and she drank gratefully. Why are you helping me? She finally asked, handing back the canteen. Mitch took a long drink before answering. Those men, they've been hitting homesteads from here to the Dakota border. Been on their trail for 2 weeks. You're a lawman? He laughed, a short, humorless sound. No, madam. Just a man with a score to settle. They took something from you too, she guessed. His expression hardened. Everything. The single word held such weight that Winnie didn't press further. Instead, she moved to the creek's edge and knelt to splash cold water on her face, still streaked with soot and tears. Your camp, she said after a moment. Is it far? Couple more hours, he replied, checking his horse's saddle. It's not much. Just a spot I've been using while I track these men. And after we reach your camp? Mitch paused. Thought you might want to head to Sweetwater. Town's about a day's ride south. They've got a sheriff there, might be able to help you find kin to stay with. I don't have any kin, Winnie said. It was just me and Pa since Ma died. He nodded, as if he'd expected as much. Well, there's work in town for a woman who's not afraid of it. Laundry, cooking, that sort of thing. Winnie thought of her burning home, of her father lying dead in the yard. I want them to pay, she said, surprised by the steel in her own voice. The men who did this. Mitch studied her, his expression unreadable. Revenge isn't a path for someone like you. Someone like me? Her chin lifted. You don't know me, Mr. Jones. I know grief makes people do foolish things, he replied. And I know those men would do worse than kill you if they caught you. Winnie looked away, unable to argue with the truth of his words. But the image of her father falling wouldn't leave her. They continued their journey after the brief rest, Winnie once again holding tight to Mitch as they rode west. The sun was low in the sky when they finally crested a hill overlooking a small valley with a stream running through it. A simple camp was set up near the water, a lean-to shelter, a fire pit, and a small corral made of rope where another horse grazed. Home sweet home, Mitch said dryly, guiding his mount down the slope. Once at the camp, he helped Winnie dismount before tending to his horse, removing the saddle and brushing the animal down. Winnie stood awkwardly, unsure of her place in this strange man's domain. You can wash up at the stream if you want, Mitch said, gesturing downstream. There's a bend just yonder that gives some privacy. I'll get a fire going. Grateful for the chance to be alone, Winnie followed the stream until she found the spot he'd mentioned. She knelt by the water, looking at her reflection for the first time since fleeing her home. Soot streaked her face, and her blonde hair was a tangled mess. Her nightgown, All she'd been wearing when she escaped was torn and dirty. She washed as best she could, then returned to find Mitch had indeed started a fire and was cooking something in a cast-iron skillet. He looked up as she approached, then silently reached for one of his saddlebags. From it, he pulled a checked shirt and a pair of trousers. "They'll be big on you," he said, holding them out. "But they're clean." Winnie hesitated before taking the clothes. "Thank you." He nodded toward the lean-to. "You can change in there. Then we'll eat." The clothes swam on her, but she rolled up the sleeves and pant legs, securing the waist with a piece of rope she found in the shelter. When she emerged, Mitch was dishing up plates of beans and salt pork. They ate in silence, the events of the day weighing heavily between them. When they finished, Mitch took the plates to the stream to rinse them, returning to find Winnie staring into the fire. "You should get some sleep," he said. "Take the lean-to. I'll sleep out here." Winnie looked up at him. "I still don't understand why you're helping me." Mitch sat across from her, the fire between them. For a long moment, he said nothing, just stared into the flames. "Then, 6 months ago, I had a small cattle operation near the Powder River. Not much, but it was mine. Then those same men came through." He paused, his jaw working. "I wasn't there. Was in town getting supplies. When I got back, everything was gone. My ranch hands murdered. The cattle stolen or slaughtered. The house burned to the ground." "I'm sorry," Winnie said softly. "Been tracking them since," he continued as if he hadn't heard her. "They hit a place, then disappear for weeks before showing up somewhere else. Hard to predict. Hard to catch. But you're still trying." "What else would I do?" He looked up at her then, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "A man needs purpose." Winnie thought about that as she lay in the lean-to later, wrapped in a blanket Mitch had provided. Purpose. Her purpose had been taking care of her father since her mother died when Winnie was 15. Now, what was left? Revenge? A new life in some town? Washing other people's clothes? Sleep came in fitful bursts, images of her burning home and falling father invading her dreams. She woke at dawn to find Mitch already up, tending a small fire with coffee brewing. "Thought we might head back today," he said as she emerged from the shelter. "Give your pa a proper burial." Winnie nodded, grateful for his understanding. "Thank you." They set off after a sparse breakfast, riding double again on Mitch's stallion. The day was clear, the summer sun warming the air as they traveled east. Winnie found herself oddly comforted by Mitch's solid presence, by the rhythmic movement of the horse beneath them. When they crested the final hill overlooking her homestead, Winnie gasped. The cabin was a charred ruin, and her father's body was gone. "Someone's been here," Mitch said tensely, his hand moving to his pistol. He scanned the area before cautiously guiding his horse down the slope. They found tracks in the yard, multiple horses and men. Mitch dismounted to study them. "Townsfolk, probably," he said after a moment. "Saw the smoke. Came to investigate." He pointed to a fresh mound of earth near the garden. "They buried your pa." Winnie slid from the horse and approached the crude grave. Someone had fashioned a cross from 2 pieces of wood, but there was no name, nothing to indicate who lay beneath. She knelt beside it, placing her hand on the fresh, turned earth. "I should have something to say," she whispered. "Some words to send him off proper." Mitch removed his hat, standing respectfully a few paces behind her. "Your pa was a good man?" "The best," she replied. "Taught me everything, how to shoot, how to farm, how to survive out here." "Then tell him that," Mitch said. "Tell him what he meant to you." So Winnie did, speaking softly of memories and lessons learned, of love and gratitude. When she finished, she felt hollowed out but somehow lighter. "I'd like to look through what's left," she said, rising and turning toward the charred remains of the cabin. Mitch nodded. "I'll keep watch." Winnie picked through the ruins carefully, finding little that had survived the fire. A cast iron skillet, A few tools from her father's workshop that had been built separately from the main house. A charred corner of the quilt her mother had made for her wedding bed. She gathered what she could salvage, wrapping it in a piece of canvas Mitch provided. As the sun began to set, he approached her where she stood surveying the remains of her life. "We should go," he said gently. "Not safe to be out in the open after dark." Winnie nodded, taking one last look at her father's grave before mounting the horse behind Mitch. As they rode away, she couldn't help looking back, watching as the homestead disappeared from view, a faint wisp of smoke still rising from the ruins. They made camp that night by a different stream, halfway between Winnie's former home and Mitch's temporary one. After a quiet meal, Winnie found herself talking, sharing stories of her father, of growing up in the territory, of dreams she'd once had of traveling east to Philadelphia, where her mother had grown up. Mitch listened more than he spoke, but when he did share, his words painted pictures of a life spent roaming, of cattle drives and frontier towns, of a brief attempt at settling down that ended with fire and death. "What will you do," Winnie asked, "after you find these men?" Mitch stared into the fire. "Haven't thought that far ahead." "Maybe you should," she said softly. His eyes met hers across the flames. "Maybe." The next morning brought rain, a steady drizzle that soaked through their clothes as they rode back to Mitch's camp. By the time they arrived, both were chilled to the bone. "Gotta get you dry," Mitch said as he helped Winnie down from the horse. "Fire first, then we'll figure out the rest." Despite the rain, he managed to get a fire going inside the lean-to, which was just big enough for both of them if they sat close. Winnie shivered as Mitch rummaged through his saddlebags, producing a flask of whiskey. "Medicinal purposes," he said, offering it to her. "Warm you from the inside." Winnie had never had hard liquor before, but she took a small sip, coughing as it burned down her throat. Mitch smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him, and took the flask back, taking a longer pull himself. "What now?" Winnie asked as warmth began to spread through her limbs. "You still plan to send me to Sweetwater?" Mitch considered this. Would be the sensible thing. But sense and I haven't always been on speaking terms, he admitted. And those men are still out there. Winnie stared into the small fire. "I want to help you find them." Mitch shook his head. "Too dangerous." "They killed my father," she said firmly. "Burned everything I had. I deserve a say in what happens to them." "And what would you do if we found them?" 5 armed men who wouldn't think twice about killing a woman. "I can shoot," she replied. Pa made sure of that. "Shooting at targets is different from shooting at men," Mitch said. "And these aren't just men, they're killers." "So are you," Winnie said, meeting his gaze. "I see it in your eyes. You've killed before." Mitch looked away. "That doesn't make it right. Does it make it wrong to want justice?" He had no answer for that. They stayed at the camp for 3 days while the rain continued, turning the ground to mud and the streams to rushing torrents. During that time, they fell into an unexpected rhythm, Mitch hunting and maintaining the camp, Winnie cooking and mending his spare clothes. They talked more, learning each other's stories in greater detail. Mitch, she discovered, had been a soldier in the war between the states, fighting for the Union before deserting after Gettysburg, unable to stomach any more killing. He drifted west, working as a cowhand, a prospector, even a bounty hunter briefly before trying to settle down with his small herd of cattle. "Never meant to stay in one place so long," he admitted one evening. "But something about that valley spoke to me. Made me want to put down roots." "And now?" Winnie asked. "Now I don't know if I can ever settle again," he said honestly. "Not until I find some kind of peace." On the 4th morning, the rain finally stopped. Mitch announced his plan to ride into Sweetwater for supplies and information. "I'll come with you," Winnie said immediately. Mitch shook his head. "Better if you stay here. Town's no place for a woman alone, especially one who's just lost everything." I'm not staying behind while you go chasing after those men, she insisted. I'm not chasing today, he said. Just gathering information. Seeing if there's been word of any other attacks. Winnie stood her ground. Then there's no danger in me coming along. Mitch sighed, recognizing the stubborn set of her jaw.
Fine.
But you stay close, and we're not staying overnight. Sweetwater turned out to be little more than a collection of wooden buildings strung along a muddy main street, a general store, a saloon, a small hotel, and a handful of other businesses. A sign declaring sheriff hung crookedly from one building. Mitch tied his horse outside the general store and helped Winnie down. We'll get supplies first, he said. Then I'll check with the sheriff. Inside the store, Winnie was acutely aware of her appearance, still wearing Mitch's oversized clothes, her hair hastily braided. The storekeeper, a portly man with bushy sideburns, eyed them curiously. Afternoon, Mitch said, tipping his hat. Need some provisions. While Mitch gathered flour, coffee, and ammunition, Winnie found herself drawn to a display of women's clothing. Her fingers brushed over a simple blue calico dress, the first feminine thing she'd touched in days. That would suit you, came a female voice from behind her. Winnie turned to find a woman perhaps 10 years her senior, dressed plainly but neatly, with kind eyes and a warm smile. I'm Vera Williams, the woman said. My husband runs the hotel down the street.
Winifred Blackburn, Winnie replied hesitantly.
Vera's eyes widened slightly.
Blackburn.
From the homestead east of here? We heard what happened. I'm so sorry for your loss. Word traveled fast in these parts.
Thank you, Winnie said.
It was unexpected. Most tragedies are, Vera said sympathetically. Are you staying in town now? Before Winnie could answer, Mitch appeared beside her, his arms full of supplies. Mrs. Williams, he said with a nod. Good to see you. Mr. Jones, Vera replied, her expression shifting to something more guarded. Didn't expect to see you back in these parts. Just passing through, Mitch said. Getting supplies. Vera looked between them, clearly drawing conclusions. Well, Miss Blackburn, if you need anything a proper place to stay, perhaps the hotel has a room available. Winnie glanced at Mitch, who kept his face carefully neutral. Thank you, she said to Vera. But I'm fine for now. After paying for the supplies, including the blue dress that Mitch insisted on buying for her, they stepped back onto the muddy street. People here know you, Winnie observed. Stayed here a few times, Mitch replied. Not always on the best terms with the locals. Because of your bounty hunting? He shook his head. Because I tend to mind my own business, and some folks take that as unfriendly. At the sheriff's office, they found a harried-looking man in his 50s with a silver star pinned to his vest. Sheriff Dawson, Mitch greeted him. The sheriff looked up, recognition crossing his features.
Jones.
Heard you were still in the territory. What brings you to my town? Mitch explained about the attack on Winnie's homestead, careful to leave out his own vendetta. The sheriff listened, occasionally making notes. Same description as the others, he said when Mitch finished. 5 men moving fast, taking what they can carry and burning the rest. He glanced at Winnie. Sorry about your father, miss. Good man, from what I knew of him. Have there been other attacks recently? Mitch asked. The sheriff nodded. 3 in the last month, all following the same pattern. Word is they're headed north, toward the Montana border. Any leads on who they are? Gang led by a man named Cutler, the sheriff said. Former Confederate officer turned outlaw. Mean as they come. Winnie noticed Mitch's jaw tighten at the name. You know him? She asked when they left the sheriff's office. Heard of him, Mitch replied tersely. He's got a reputation. They gathered the rest of their supplies and were preparing to leave town when a commotion near the saloon caught their attention. A group of men had spilled out onto the boardwalk, shouting and pushing. Trouble, Mitch muttered, instinctively moving to put himself between Winnie and the disturbance. One of the men, tall and heavily bearded, spotted them and broke away from the group. "Jones," he called, his voice slurred with drink. "Thought that was you skulking around town." Mitch's hand moved to his pistol. "Not looking for trouble, Hardin." "Well, trouble found you," Hardin replied, staggering closer. "Still hunting those ghosts of yours?" "Move along," Mitch said evenly. Hardin's eyes shifted to Winnie. "Found yourself some company, I see. Pretty little thing. She know what kind of man you really are, Jones." "That's enough," Mitch growled. But Hardin was too drunk to heed the warning. "You tell her how you gunned down my brother?" "Shot him in the back while he was running." "Your brother was wanted for murder," Mitch said. "And I shot him face to face after he drew on me." "Liar." Hardin reached for his own pistol, but he was slow and unsteady. Mitch's draw was lightning fast by comparison. His gun was out and pointed at Hardin before the drunk had cleared leather. "Don't," Mitch warned. For a tense moment, it seemed Hardin might continue his draw regardless of the consequences. Then the fight seemed to drain out of him. His hand fell away from his weapon. "One day, Jones," he slurred. "One day you'll get what's coming to you." "Maybe," Mitch agreed. "But not today and not from you." He backed away, keeping his gun trained on Hardin until they reached his horse. Only then did he holster his weapon and help Winnie mount. They rode out of town in silence, the encounter having cast a pall over the day. Miles passed before Winnie finally spoke. Was he telling the truth? About his brother? Mitch sighed.
Partly.
"I did kill his brother, but it wasn't in the back, and it was a murder. I was working as a bounty hunter then. His brother had killed a family up near Cheyenne. I tracked him for 2 weeks before catching up to him." "And he drew on you?" "Yes," Mitch said simply.
He drew, I shot."
That's the whole story. But Winnie sensed there was more to it than he was saying. "Is that why you stopped bounty hunting?" Mitch was silent for so long that Winnie thought he wouldn't answer. "Then, I stopped because I was becoming something I didn't recognize. Something hard and cold. Killing changes a man, even when it's justified." They reached the camp as dusk was falling. After tending to the horse and unpacking their supplies, Mitch announced he was going to check his traps for rabbit. Winnie took the opportunity to change into the new dress, grateful to finally be wearing clothes that fit properly. When Mitch returned with 2 rabbits, he stopped short at the sight of her. "You look different," he said awkwardly. Winnie smoothed the blue fabric. "Good different or bad different?" "Good," he replied, looking away quickly. "Definitely good." They prepared the rabbits together, an unexpected domesticity to their movements around the fire. As they ate, Mitch finally brought up what they'd learned in town. "If Cutler and his gang are heading north, we have a chance of intercepting them," he said. "There's only one good pass through the mountains this time of year." Winnie noted his use of "we" but didn't comment on it. "What then?" "It's still 5 against 1. 5 against 2, Mitch corrected, meeting her eyes across the fire. "If you're still set on coming." "I am," she said firmly. Mitch nodded slowly. "Then we ride at first light. It's a 2-day journey to the pass." That night, as Winnie lay in the lean-to trying to sleep, she found her thoughts continually returning to Mitch. He was a complex man capable of violence, yet gentle with her, driven by revenge, yet concerned for her safety. She couldn't deny the growing attraction she felt toward him, inappropriate as it might be given the circumstances. Morning brought a heavy fog that clung to the valley, limiting visibility to just a few yards. Mitch seemed unsettled by it. "Makes for good cover," he said as they broke camp. "But it works both ways. We won't see trouble coming." They rode double again, following game trails up into the foothills. By midday, they'd climbed high enough to emerge above the fog, the valley below them a sea of white. They made good time through the afternoon, the terrain becoming more rugged as they ascended. Camp that night was made in a sheltered hollow near a spring. As they sat by the fire, Winnie found herself studying Mitch's face in the flickering light. What happens after? She asked suddenly. After we find these men and do what needs to be done. Mitch poked at the fire with a stick. Haven't thought that far ahead. You said that before, Winnie pointed out. Maybe it's time to start thinking about it. He looked up at her. What about you? What happens after for you? Winnie had been asking herself the same question. I don't know, she admitted. I can't go back to the homestead. Too many memories. You could still go to Sweetwater. Start fresh. I could, she agreed. Or, Winnie took a deep breath. Or, I could come with you. Wherever you decide to go next. Mitch's expression was unreadable in the firelight. Why would you want to do that? Because. Winnie struggled to find the right words. Because when I'm with you, I feel safe. And because I think maybe we both need someone to remind us there's more to life than loss and vengeance. Mitch set down his coffee cup, his movements deliberate. Winnie, I'm not the kind of man a woman like you should tie herself to. What kind of man are you then? Broken, he said simply. Used up. There's nothing left of me but this hunt. Winnie moved around the fire to sit beside him. I don't believe that. Mitch stared straight ahead, not meeting her eyes. You should. I've seen how you look at me when you think I don't notice, she said softly. That's not nothing, Mitch. He turned to her then, his expression pained. I've got no right to look at you anyway at all. No right to want anything beyond what I've set out to do. And what about what I want? Winnie challenged. Before he could answer, the sound of distant gunfire echoed through the hills. Mitch was on his feet instantly, hand on his pistol. That came from up toward the pass, he said, listening as more shots rang out. Someone's in trouble. They doused the fire and mounted up, riding hard through the darkness toward the source of the gunfire. As they crested a ridge, they could see muzzle flashes in the distance, a firefight near the very pass they were heading for. Mitch reined in his horse. Could be Cutler and his gang, he said. Might have run into resistance. Or it could be someone else entirely, Winnie pointed out. Only one way to find out, Mitch replied, urging his horse forward again. They approached cautiously, leaving the horse tethered in a stand of pines before continuing on foot. The gunfire had stopped, replaced by the sounds of men moving about and occasional shouts. Crawling to the edge of a rocky outcrop, they peered down at a small clearing. 5 men were gathered around a campfire, while a 6th lay unmoving on the ground nearby. A wagon stood to one side, its canvas cover torn and flapping in the night breeze. It's them, Mitch whispered, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. That's Cutler in the center, tall man with the gray in his beard. Winnie studied the group. They looked ordinary enough, trail-worn men enjoying their evening meal. It was hard to reconcile the scene with the violence these same men had inflicted on her home. Who did they attack? She asked, nodding toward the body. Looks like a traitor, Mitch replied. Probably refused to hand over his goods. So what now? We can't take on 5 armed men. Mitch's jaw set in a hard line. We wait. Pick our moment. They retreated to where they'd left the horse, setting up a cold camp well hidden in the trees. Mitch took first watch, promising to wake Winnie in a few hours. But when Winnie opened her eyes, dawn was breaking. Mitch sat where she'd left him, still watching the trail to the clearing. You didn't wake me, she accused, sitting up. Couldn't sleep anyway, he said, not looking at her. Have they moved? Not yet. They're sleeping off whatever they were drinking last night. Winnie moved to sit beside him. What's the plan? I'm going down there, Mitch said. You're staying here. We've been through this. This isn't negotiable, Winnie, he cut her off. These men are killers. I'm not risking your life. It's my fight too, she insisted. And if something happens to you? Mitch turned to face her, his expression fierce. I've already lost everything once. I won't go through that again. The implication of his words hung between them. Winnie reached out, placing her hand on his. Nothing's going to happen to me. Or to you. We do this together. Mitch stared at their joined hands for a long moment before sighing in resignation. "Stay behind me. If things go bad, you run. Don't look back, just run. Promise me." "I promise," Winnie said, though they both knew it was a lie. They approached the clearing cautiously, Mitch leading with his pistol drawn. The camp was still quiet, the bandits sleeping around the remains of their fire. The dead trader had been dragged to the edge of the clearing and covered with a tarp. Mitch signaled for Winnie to stay in the trees while he crept forward. His plan, as he'd explained it, was to get the drop on them while they slept, force them to surrender without bloodshed, if possible. But 20 feet from the sleeping men, a twig snapped under Mitch's boot. One of the bandits stirred, then sat up suddenly, reaching for his gun.
"Now!"
Mitch shouted, aiming at Cutler's prone form. The chaos erupted. Men scrambled for weapons, shots were fired. Winnie saw Mitch dive for cover behind the wagon as bullets splintered the wood around him. Drawing the pistol Mitch had given her, she fired at one of the bandits who was flanking Mitch's position. Her shot went wide, but it distracted the man long enough for Mitch to take aim and drop him with a shot to the chest. 3 more bandits were returning fire now, forcing both Mitch and Winnie to keep their heads down. Winnie crawled through the underbrush, trying to circle around behind the bandits. She emerged from the trees just in time to see Cutler himself breaking away from the fight, heading for the horses tethered nearby. "Mitch," she called out, pointing. "He's getting away." Mitch turned, took aim, and fired, but Cutler was already mounted and riding hard down the trail. Without hesitation, Mitch broke cover and ran for the remaining horse, leaping onto its back. "Stay here," he shouted to Winnie as he wheeled the animal around. "I'll be back." Before she could protest, he was gone, galloping after Cutler. The remaining bandits, seeing their leader flee, began to fall back as well. One made a run for the trees, and Winnie, acting on instinct, stepped out and leveled her pistol at him. "Don't move," she ordered, surprised at the steadiness of her voice. The man froze, then slowly raised his hands. From across the clearing, the last bandit took aim at Winnie, but before he could fire, a shot rang out from the direction Mitch had gone. The bandit crumpled to the ground. Mitch rode back into the clearing, his expression grim. "Cutler?" "Got away," Mitch admitted, dismounting. "Lost him in the rocks up ahead." He nodded toward the bandit Winnie had at gunpoint. "I see you've been busy. What do we do with him?" Winnie asked. "Tie him up," Mitch said. "We'll take him to the sheriff in the next town. He can hang properly." The bandit's eyes widened in fear. "I didn't kill anyone. That was Cutler and Pike. I just rode with them." "You burned my home," Winnie said coldly. "Watched while they murdered my father." Recognition dawned in the man's eyes. "The homestead east of Sweetwater," he said. "That wasn't supposed to happen that way. Cutler just wanted the gold." "What gold?" Mitch demanded. "Old man was supposed to have a stash," the bandit said quickly. "That's what Cutler heard in town. But he wouldn't tell us where it was, even when." He trailed off, but Winnie could fill in the blank.
"Even when they tortured him."
Her father had died protecting nothing. There had never been any gold. Mitch secured the bandit with rope from the trader's wagon, then checked the bodies of the others. 3 dead, he reported, including the one you distracted. "And Cutler got away," Winnie said, the victory feeling hollow. "For now," Mitch replied. "But he's alone, probably wounded. He won't get far." They buried the trader properly, saying a few words over his grave before loading the surviving bandit onto the wagon. As they prepared to leave, Winnie took one last look around the clearing at the evidence of the violence that had erupted there. "Does it feel like justice?" she asked Mitch quietly. He considered the question. "Not yet," he admitted. "Maybe it never will." They traveled for 2 days, following the trail toward the nearest town with a sheriff. The bandit, who reluctantly gave his name as Lester, provided details of Cutler's operation, how they selected targets, how they disposed of stolen goods. where they typically holed up between raids. On the evening of the second day, they made camp by a small lake. After securing Lester to a tree, Mitch and Winnie sat by the fire, closer than they had on previous nights. "What will you do after we turn him in?" Winnie asked. "Will you keep hunting Cutler?" Mitch was quiet for a long moment. "I've been thinking about what you said, about what comes after." Winnie waited, hardly daring to hope. "I've been carrying this hate for so long," Mitch continued. "It's become part of me. But today, watching you stand your ground against that bandit, I realized something." "What's that?" "That maybe there's room for something else besides hate and memories." He reached out hesitantly, taking her hand in his. "If you meant what you said about coming with me." "I meant it," Winnie assured him, her heart beating faster. Every word. Mitch's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "I've got nothing to offer you. No home, no land." "I don't need those things," Winnie said. "Just you." In the firelight, she could see the conflict in his eyes, the desire to believe her warring with years of solitude and pain. She leaned forward, closing the distance between them, and pressed her lips gently to his. For a moment, Mitch remained still. Then his free hand came up to cup her cheek, and he returned the kiss with unexpected tenderness. When they finally broke apart, Mitch rested his forehead against hers. "I thought I'd never feel anything good again," he whispered. "Neither did I," Winnie admitted. "Not after watching my home burn." Mitch pulled back slightly to look into her eyes. "We could build a new home, somewhere far from here, maybe up in Montana Territory, or even farther west to Oregon." "I'd like that," Winnie said, smiling through sudden tears. "A fresh start." "It won't be easy," Mitch warned. "And there's still Cutler." "We'll find him," Winnie assured him. "Together. And then we'll put it all behind us." Mitch nodded slowly, as if accepting this new possibility. "Together," he agreed. They reached the town of Pine Ridge the following afternoon, delivering Lester to a surprised but grateful sheriff. Their description of Cutler was circulated, rewards posted. They spent the night at the town's only hotel in separate rooms, despite the growing intimacy between them. Morning brought unexpected news. Cutler had been found dead in a ravine 10 miles north, his horse having apparently stumbled in the dark. Justice, it seemed, had found him after all. Mitch received the news with quiet reflection rather than celebration. "It's over," he said as they stood on the hotel porch. "All of it." Winnie took his hand. "Not all of it. Some things are just beginning." He smiled then, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Where to, Miss Blackburn?" "West," she decided. "As far as we can go." 3 weeks later, they crossed into Oregon Territory, the vast expanse of the Willamette Valley spreading before them. They had married in a small ceremony in Idaho, with only the local preacher and his wife as witnesses. Now, as they crested a hill overlooking what would become their new home, Mitch pulled his horse to a stop. "What do you think?" he asked, gesturing to the fertile land below. "Could you be happy here?" Winnie leaned forward, resting her chin on his shoulder as she had that first day when they fled her burning homestead. So much had changed since then. The grief was still there, the memories of all they had lost. But alongside them grew something new: hope, possibility, love. "I already am," she replied, tightening her arms around his waist. Mitch covered her hands with his own. "I've got room for these memories too," he said softly. "The good ones we're making." Winnie smiled against his back, thinking of the long road that had brought them here and the longer one still ahead. "Then let's make more," she said. "A lifetime of them." And as they rode down toward their future, Winnie knew that while smoke from her old home had faded into memory, the fire in her heart, kindled by loss but fueled by love, would burn bright for all the days to come.